guys. Yeah, you can hear me. Yay! You should be hearing me now, isn't it? Okay, can you try speaking, Gavin?
Sure, yeah. Can everyone hear us now? How's it
Yeah, I
going?
think everything is fine.
Success.
Yeah,
Excellent.
really sorry about that. Little technical issues. I thought it was all set up. Not sure what song. So we messed up the intro, but like Gavin is here. No need for an intro. My name is Nick. I am an architect, a BIM specialist, and the founder of Revit Pure. And right there, you have Gavin Crump, also known as the Aussie BIM Guru, who's been on a break from YouTube for a really long time, and now he's joining us for a super holiday special. So thanks everyone for watching live, despite this little technical hiccups, but it's all fixed already. Just messed up the intro, but now all good. So how are you, Gavin?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. It's great to be back in the YouTube space. Thanks for having me on. And great to see so many people from around the world taking time off from probably their Christmas party
Yeah,
or their
yeah.
holidays to come and wind up the year on BIM and Revit in the industry. So yeah, thanks for having me on board and look forward to talking about all the topics we've laid out today.
Yeah, I'm having a look in the chat. Lots of people, lots of Aussies in there. Lots of people from Australia. I can see lots of people from Uganda, people from New Jersey, from Kansas. So thanks everyone watching live. And for those not watching live, we're currently on, at least for me, December 21st. So on the shortest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. And in Australia, it's actually the longest day. But regardless for location, both about to celebrate Christmas. I was always wondered myself how it's like to celebrate Christmas in summertime. Got to be a different vibe.
Yeah, it's sort of just like an ordinary day to some degree because the weather doesn't
Hmm.
look all Christmassy because all
Yeah,
the all
yeah.
the, the Christmas cards you get have snow on them in Australia still. We don't have like the beach on our Christmas cards, so it sort of just feels like an ordinary day to some degree. You just see the family. Sometimes some people go to the beach. Typically, we just do as little as possible, minus eat a big lunch. So probably the same as everywhere else, but just a different climate. So, but it is a bit strange and jarring to have that image of Christmas looking so different from
Yeah,
from what
yeah. Probably
typically we
so,
have.
yeah. It's
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
and
it's
you still
about
have all this iconography from Christmas with
yeah.
snow-covered buildings and so on. All right, so since it's we're getting close to the end of the year, getting close to the vacation. Like tomorrow for me, I'll try to finish all I have left to do. So cheers to everyone. I'm
Cheers.
drinking and just a pale beer, local beer from around the
Can't go wrong
place.
with a good pale ale.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm drinking a whiskey. This is Nikia, my favorite. So I don't know if Tony Howard's here, but he had mentioned on LinkedIn to me saying you're probably gonna have a whiskey, aren't you? And feels
Hmm.
right.
Yeah, midday whiskey is here. You do have a Christmas party later in the day or Christmas dinner or
Yeah,
something?
yeah, I'm about to jump about probably 5 minutes after this onto a bus and go straight to a Christmas party. So this is my pre-drink. But
All right,
cheers.
so cheers to everyone watching live and for those of you in the replay as well. So you've been lots have been going on in your life this year. If I'm not wrong, you've moved to your original hometown.
Yes, I have. So I just moved back to Adelaide about a bit over a month ago now. So I moved from here to Sydney in Australia about 8 years ago, and it really my career completely transformed in that city. That was my first big management role, coming from a tech background,
Mm-hmm.
and jumped around quite a few companies. I won't lie. Before deciding to become a consultant, and this all happened in Sydney, and I learned a lot more about large scale project delivery. Adelaide is a growing city still, but it's a different scale. So you don't always see the same types of projects that come up. And I guess while I worked in Sydney, eventually I found the company Architectus, who I work with a component of called BIM Consulting, who are sort of like a parented organization, and realized I could actually come back here while still maintaining pretty much most of my work I was doing with them, and have a the same rent to have a house instead of an apartment, being in my
Yeah,
family, being a much easier city to live in for me at least. I like a sort of quieter pace of life. Sydney was fun, especially as a bachelor, but now that I'm engaged and settling down,
yeah. But I
well,
think last time we talked about like the real estate price in the Sydney, and it seemed like pretty crazy.
It
It's
hasn't got much
hard to
better.
believe.
I hate to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, and I know it's a similar story over on your side of the world as well, especially in Canada. It's probably actually a very similar challenge, especially in the big cities like Toronto, for example. I know Sydney and Toronto are almost parallel in the
Hmm.
disparity of wages and real estate cost. And COVID only seemed to increase the cost of property. And now it's trying to go back down to the pre-COVID numbers, but hasn't quite reached it
Yeah,
yet.
I think it's starting the market starting to chill with the higher in interest rate. Here, I live in Quebec City, so the price are not too crazy yet. Like it's nothing like in Toronto or Vancouver, which are pretty wild.
Yeah.
Probably similar to your place in Australia. So
Oh,
congrats for that, and congrats for being engaged too.
cheers. Yeah.
Great
Huge
news.
one.
Yeah, let's drink to that.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Cheers.
So I think last year we're maybe about to um, get with Architectus and
Mm.
on an almost full time role. So how did you decide to do that full time, or at least almost full time, instead
Yeah,
of keeping
interesting
being
journey.
working on your own?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a bit of a flip flop to some degree because I guess I came from big practice, went to consulting alone, and went back to big practice whilst downscaling my consulting more or less to a handful of clients by choice. And I guess I mean my original driver to go into consulting is I did want a broader understanding of how BIM could assist different types of clients that an architecture firm doesn't always give you the visibility of. And I also wanted to give myself the opportunity to put my thoughts pretty strongly out there, form opinions, share content that you can't usually share within the confines of a company. And that let me do that, build my own content brand, put much more controversial topics on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And then by coming back to a firm, I basically went in with a contract that I could massage with the company to give me some degree of free reign. I can't just go out there and say everything on behalf of the company, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, it gave me a better entry point back to the industry. The real reason I sort of went back was really I just wanted to find a team of people like me. And whilst I could, go and take on the full risk and build BIM Guru into a multifaceted organization, I looked at the economic climate. I looked at what's involved with that, whether I would even be able to use tools and BIM anymore, which is really what I enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
and realized I probably couldn't. So I found a really great team called BIM Consulting. There's about 20 of us, I believe, at the moment in a company of about 400 people, typically all architects or mostly architects, some ops and admin in there. And they support architects in their day-to-day BIM and delivery needs. But then we also have out-facing consulting components such as coordination with the contractors. So it's a really interesting team. There's web developers, there's other programmers like me. So it was great to sort of meet a team that could cover bases all together rather than having to just be like the all-in-one powerhouse that just needs to know everything and do everything. So it's been a really refreshing change. There's one person that sort of built the company originally, a guy called Steve. Steve Fox. He's a really great guy as well. So I met up with him and we just sort of put two and two together, and it made sense for me to join and sort of bring my experience, my interests, and sort of unite them with a broader group. So yeah, it was an interesting opportunity. It's a big change, but I'm still doing consulting as well in a very small capacity now. But it's been quite exciting. How about yourself? How's your own sort of consulting venture going now that it's been an extra year down the line from last time we spoke about it?
Yeah, well, it's pretty interesting to hear all your thought process about it. Yeah, I'm currently at a stage where I could definitely start hiring people, and
Right.
but so far I've decided to keep it by myself, except for a few specific contracts where I will hire a few MEP experts, for example, people do I know, that I know that can help me for a specific part of it, or little things that I can outsource sometime, like creating some families or part of the content. I'll try to do it with the friends I know in the industry, but more on a small contract basis. So definitely, I could bring people full time at this point, but I'm still in the phase. Is this what I actually want? I think if you start doing this, it can get different. Maybe if you keep a small team, not that much. I'm definitely not interested in building a super big team.
Yeah, you don't want to have
But
an empire per se.
exactly, yeah. I mean, it's yeah, you have to have a certain mindset to do it. Like just
Mhm. I think that's smart to look at
mhm,
outsourcing or delegating components to
mhm.
temporary arrangements. Because that's what I found with the project work. Sometimes comes in super thick, and sometimes it comes in quiet for a week, and you wouldn't want to have to hold a whole team of 20 people when there's no projects on the table.
Yeah.
And I guess too, Revit slash BIM Pure is it's very much a you brand. You've built it, you are the face of it.
Hmm.
So to bring someone in that shares that level of brand awareness is a challenge, right? For someone to be right on board with the same level of dedication that you are to the brand. Mm.
Y- Yeah, although the online content creation and consulting can is it it's pretty different. It's I'm
Mm.
trying
You
to
sort of
bring.
separated them, haven't you? They're sort of two avenues. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty distinct, I would say.
Mm.
Although, like I'm operating as a consultant under BIM Pure, but next year my plan is to bring Revit Pure, um, for it to evolve into BIM Pure as well.
Cool. Cool.
And I'm working on a new website that is gonna be better than the old one. So I'm thinking currently just brainstorming what's the best way to create an education website for BIM.
Mm. Mm.
Brainstorming all the different models. I've been thinking membership, for example. I'm not sure about that because it doesn't work for everyone.
Mm. Mm.
And
Well, I guess you've got
is
Jeffrey, the Revit kid. He's made his BIM
yeah,
after dark membership work really well, so it's definitely manageable. Just got to
yeah,
define
yeah,
what
yeah. He's
it.
using the community model,
Mm.
or other, like if you think about the big players when it comes to BIM learning, they're probably LinkedIn Learning, formerly
Mm.
lynda.com, which is also working on a membership, basically just a monthly subscription. Or if you think about Masterclass with all these celebrities teaching,
Mm.
it's also the way they work is a yearly subscription. You cannot pay by the month. You have to buy for a year, which is pretty interesting.
Mm. Mm.
Especially the problem is if I have like templates and stuff like that as well. So like a monthly subscription doesn't really work for that kind of
Makes
content.
sense. Yeah.
Doesn't make much
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all kind of things I've been pondering, but I'm working on a new website. All the details, still details to figure out, but just want to bring it with the new image I've been using for my consulting business for about a year so far. Um,
Great. It's really exciting. It sounds like a
mhm.
really promising plan. And I guess the good thing about being BIM pure is it gives you the option to go beyond the walls of Revit too, potentially.
Exactly, sure. I
Mm,
don't regret using the name Revit Pure. Like to be honest,
awesome.
it was pretty good with SEO and
Yeah.
just get digging out there. I won't lie about that. It was pretty good for that. Uh, but yeah, with BIM Pure, of course, I want to go beyond. I mean, at the same time, I just want to be helpful. So if there's still a big demand for specific Revit topics, that's what I do. And typically,
Sure.
it's what I do in my consulting business, inform the kind of content I'll be teaching um, on Revit Pure, soon to be BIM
Yeah.
Pure. But
You
of
had a
course,
really good
yeah,
point with SEO there because the
uh
BIM consulting company I work for is literally called BIM Consulting. So
yeah.
if you
When
look
you
up BIM
type it,
Consulting,
yeah,
they're always number one.
yeah, pretty smart. That's pretty smart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good move. Cool, excellent. Sounds
Uh,
very exciting.
Yeah, but in the long run, I would have to like have content not just by me as well. Like, question is how can you have other people that they bring their own energy and own knowledge, but at the same time fitting in the BIM pure model that it's makes sense. If you go from one other to the other, there's at least a bit of consistency, and you know a little bit what to expect, even though of course the teaching style can be a little different at the same time.
Mm, mm. I mean, I think the differing point, because most platforms that try to do that, they sort of lose their own brand at some point,
Mm-hmm.
don't they? They become more generic. Whereas if you hold your personality, your brand, your
Mm-hmm.
face is what brings it all together. You're the gatherer that brings these people to share their knowledge. That
Yeah,
might
yeah.
be the standing point. But yeah, sounds interesting. I just saw Scout DX said, "What's our Christmas wish for 2023?" It's a good question.
Like
I'll let you
Christmas
go
wish.
first.
I don't know. Do you want to go first?
I
I
mean,
think
I
I have
guess
to think about it.
generally I just like to see the world get a little bit less chaotic and disparative. It seems like there's a lot of
Uh-huh.
inequality that only seems to be getting worse by the minute. It doesn't seem to be improving. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of geopolitical strife in the world right now,
Yeah.
and whilst I'm very lucky to be in Australia, I recognise not everyone is, and I really feel for anyone that's stuck in any sort of strife because of it. So I just hope that the world can maybe talk to each other a bit more and help each other a bit more. Yeah.
Did
Mm.
That's a pretty good wish. Yeah, well, let's hope for peace in Ukraine. At the very least, that would be a pretty good outcome for next year.
Mm.
And a Christmas wish for 2023, if we get more specific in terms of software, what would be
Sure.
your ideal? And we can segue into the one of the topic we had,
Probably
which is
will,
the
yeah. I
search
was
for
thinking.
the search for the Revit killer. So I was reading part of the article that you wrote. This is it this year that was, I think so, right?
Yeah, earlier this
This
year.
the search for the Revit killer.
Yeah, it was a fun article to write, and I guess I went in thinking very differently to how I went out of writing the article. I sort of went in with the whole, like I wish Revit wasn't the only thing there was, and I'm really annoyed about it. And I
Hmm.
sort of came out almost sympathizing, not quite sympathizing to Autodesk, but to some degree empathizing to the fact that I guess the market has become maybe too dependent on them.
Yeah,
And it's not necessarily their fault. They're a business, they want to make money, they're going to make money. So you
yeah.
can't just expect them to want to hammer their own product into the ground,
Hmm.
at least not straight away. So I think as I wrote the article, it became more of a question as to why we as an industry aren't good at changing ourselves, our own practices, and why BIM is not necessarily an interconnected business component of every firm out there. They just want to use whatever they can use to get the job
Hmm.
done. If all they've got is Revit, they're going to use Revit. I think there's a lot of platforms out there that promise more than they do as well. That was sort of one thing I sort of realized as I wrote the article. I did raise a lot of great alternatives, but they're always offering a small part of the picture. They're never saying we're going to do everything Revit does. And that made me question maybe the future of Revit isn't one platform, it's multi-platform.
Hmm.
It's the App Store on iPhone, that sort of model. So that was sort of where I went with it. But I mean, I don't wish that Revit just stops working next year and everyone has to go
Hmm.
use something else. I do wish people tried to use more platforms, I guess, maybe learn to program just a little bit because that helps you get to other
Yeah.
areas. But
Hmm.
at the same time, I can totally appreciate not everyone's passionate about BIM and Revit and programming, and some architects just want to architect. Like, I totally get that. So it was a
Yeah.
fun article. I guess, how do you feel about that sort of area?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was a pretty interesting article. I think I've already linked it in the description of this video if you want to have
Oh,
a look.
thanks.
It's called "Where's the Revit Killer?" or
Yeah.
something to that point. Well, I've been one of my clients is this public sector client that I've worked with this year, and I've realized their IT department is so conservative,
Mm.
like they're still using Revit 2020
Yep.
because their IT department they told me, well, we've asked like to upgrade to the new version, but it takes forever for them to approve.
Yeah, the
Like
business
even
case.
installing a free plugin, like to like okay, maybe if we ask now, maybe next year we'll have it. And so I just realized, okay, like obviously that's an extreme case, but a lot of the industry they're extremely conservative when it comes to software. It has to be a big player. They need to have guaranteed support, and all of these questions needs to be solved. And any potential little friction for them or a place where they might not get support, it really scares them. They don't like
Mm.
that at all. So
Yep.
even though I appreciate the open BIM movement and everything they're doing, when I see like everyone should use Blender BIM, for example, say, yeah, but it's not so easy. Like for many big players, it's too complicated for them. Like they need kind of a big player out there that's gonna
Yep.
back them. That's what I've realized. It's because not everybody is like curious and trying all sorts of software, and
Mm.
most architects don't spend that much time their day thinking about software too. So I guess I've realized that it has to be so obvious that you would change, especially if we were talking about a switch, like go from Revit to another software, generally speaking. But like, is that ever going to happen, or it's more there's going to be a software for design, another one for documentation, another one if you're doing modular, another one for something else, but they're just going to talk so well to one another that you will not need the one true platform to roll them all.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
that's a challenge. And OpenBIM
mhm.
offers that schema, I guess, that should connect these things together. But I agree that from what I have used with open platforms, they do reach a point where they're like, oh, you're not a programmer, bad luck. Like, you got to
Yeah.
learn GitHub, you got to learn, you want a revision, you're going to have to learn how Git pulls work. And it's like, all right, you just lost like everyone that doesn't use
Uh-huh.
GitHub, which is pretty much everyone in our industry,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
So there is a level where the technical expectation of the community does trump what people just want to do and how they want to do it. I always tell them keep pushing, keep going, because one day this will become what it should be. And I do feel for them because they do rely on people contributing beyond just complaining about what doesn't work. But at the same time, it's an industry that's not necessarily software development focused at the moment. But I always tell them keep going. So if anyone in OpenBIM is in the chat, they're going, "Oh, don't bash OpenBIM." All right, keep going, keep doing it. Prove them wrong is what I keep saying. Because once a firm takes a really big project from a firm that uses no OpenBIM or doesn't use OpenBIM holistically, and this company is all open, they use the right software, the right methods, and they actually prove it, that's when the industry will take notice. Or almost when it's too late. It's typically how things change. But if someone can prove that it's doable at scale, at a commercially viable scale, I think that would be the tipping point. Until then, it's a bit of a like, oh, that's great, but like, we don't believe you. Like, we're going to keep using Revit and Rhino and all these things. Like, all the big firms, they're still using Revit and Rhino mostly, in at least the American and Australian markets, and in Europe, ArchiCAD and probably Rhino as well. So until they can prove that model isn't the only model, that's sort of the tipping point, I think.
Yeah, well, I've read somewhere for like if there's an incumbent software and another software won't replace it, the replacement has to be like an order of magnitude better. That means like 10 times better. Like it has to be so obvious that you would save so much money that it would be dumb not to switch. I mean, last year we've talked about test fit. So let's say you're counting parking space by hand and you see test fit, you're like, duh, like, of course I'm going to use it. I'm going to have a money return on investment almost immediately. So I think if there's ever a Revit killer, it has to be so obvious. There's
I sort of describe it in the article as Revit wearing a cool hat. It's like just a slightly cooler version of Revit, whereas really it's like we should be questioning, has this software forced us to work in unintuitive ways that we've just accepted are the way things should be? Like, a phase is done the way that we work, a work set's really how we work. Like questioning these fundamental systems that literally dictate our process in-house. And saying, does this actually reflect architectural practice? And I think most of us would say, sure, there's definitely things that don't reflect architectural practice in Revit, but it's had to accommodate a lot of things that we need to do that no other software really does that well. Or even does is probably the biggest problem. You lose whole features. And you mentioned test fit, and it's funny because I totally look at test fit, I see it, I get it. I'm not a developer, so I'm not going to use it that really at all. Like I've played with it. I've said this makes perfect sense. If I'm going to make money out of this, I can see it. As a BIM manager, I'm basically just showing it to people going, hey, like, could you use this? That's as far as I can get with it. But like, I can see sometimes there's even that point of resistance where it's just something new to learn. And that's enough to say, sorry, can't do it, like no time. We already learned Revit after AutoCAD. There's no way we're doing that all again. So I feel the struggle with those companies where they just like, come on, it's right here, it works, just try it out. They're like, we're too busy to even try it out. Like there's a real cultural challenge in the industry with change as well. So
well, it's equally as good, but it's just slightly cheaper or for a little bit better. I'm not sure if that's enough for like a whole industry to switch. It has to be really better. Like like here's another example. If you're using Revit rendering, the default rendering tools, and you see Enscape, that's a product that's 10 times better, and that's kind of a no-brainer. Anyway,
the problem too, everyone says cost, and if there's a cheaper Revit, Autodesk's going to buy it and raise the price anyway. They never aim for costs because, like, you look at like Figma, for example, they became a threat to Adobe. Adobe bought them. Like they'll just do it because money now and later is going to always beat the money they lose by the company. So if anyone's looking for cheaper Revit, forget about it. Like the only way you can do that is OpenBIM for free. That's the closest you'll get.
I'll give a shout out to our friends over at Arcall. We've both been in the beta. I'll admit I've been in the last couple of months. I've been didn't have a lot of time to see what they've been up to, but they're working hard to create a Revit alternative that works on the browser. And also today I've spoke with someone from SnapTrude. I spoke to the CEO actually, who's I think they're a little further away at Arcall. And I haven't tried it. I've just seen demos yet, but it's on my plan to have a look. And they have a V1 release. They're just out of beta. So it's another interesting one.
So you good.
But I guess what would made me realize, I think the challenge with Revit is Revit does so many things. and some part of it are could be easy to replicate. Some others are quite complex. Like take the family editor for example. It does so many
Yeah.
things. I just gave a course about families, and I was like, God, man, there's so many. The family editor is pretty powerful. I gotta say that.
Yeah, they got a lot of things right with the family
Yeah,
editor. I've got to say, like
yeah.
I've used GDO and ArchiCAD, I've used Pramo, and
Hmm.
yeah, it doesn't scratch the itch. I guess like you can't smash out a family that quickly unless you're like a full
Yeah.
GDO coder. Whereas I can teach someone how to build a family in a day, like pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I mean, is the user interface a little outdated? Yeah, sure, but it's what it does. I haven't seen that many software doing something like that.
I mean, Revit's also built on very strong foundations when it comes to a program as well. Whilst they
Hmm.
don't have the best of many things that they're built upon anymore, they were still robust enough to get them this far. Like their geometry libraries, for example, they're using. Like, yes, they're not probably not as strong as Blender or another program that's building, modern geometry libraries to things that have been learned over the last 20 years. But they've got by on that thing like for a long time. The way that their database
Hmm.
interfaces and exchanges work is probably not necessarily up to the way we probably would do it with a new program these days. But to build it again, that's a lot of work. To not, I mean, they have things like they own the ViewCube as well. Like they have the patent on that, for example, as far as I know. So you
Hmm.
can't put a ViewCube in another program because Autodesk will sue you, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's some really weird things that they have in there too, which actually make it very hard to just rebuild a Revit. Like you almost have to change like foundational user interface principles so you don't
Yeah.
get sued on patents. So it's an interesting position that they've built and sort of solidified over the years, I guess. Yeah. Mm.
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple of good comments.
Yeah, that's right.
Scour DX says only way to kill Revit if Autodesk decided to come up with Revit 2.0, maybe. Deconstructing design with the interconnective of BIM. Do you foresee different softwares working across platforms? Let's say Revit and Bluebeam. Uh, I don't know. What do you think? I don't use Bluebeam that much.
I think the programs we have right now, that their interoperability will improve a little bit, but I think programs have to be built ground up with the intent to be
Hmm.
interoperating with other programs to really make them work. I mean, you look at Rhino Inside, for example. As far as I know, they had to not quite rebuild Rhino, but change it significantly just to be able to run in headless mode in other programs. So, like, you could obviously have built Rhino from the start to work that way, but the demand wasn't obvious to them when they first built Rhino. Now it makes sense. So I think if you're building new platforms, you'd probably just build them from the outset to work with very common industry schemas and file formats. Again, hard because there's probably thousands of file formats that we could use these days compared to 20 years ago. There's probably a lot less. But I think you almost need to build your platform to be so flexible and so robust and have such a strong API to support the many ways other programs would want to interoperate with yours. That would probably be the way they have to be done. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I think that you said that you could show us a few things you've been up to
Oh, yeah, yeah.
inside with the
Forgot
plugin, so
about
we
it.
could cut that, and Gavin could showcase what he's been up to.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I can only show a little bit. Let me know when my screen's showing, I guess. Is it?
Yeah, there it
It's
is.
great. So, I mean, I guess where I work now, I work with BIM, but also with computation. I thought I'd share a few little initiatives that we're working on. These are sort of snapshots of deeper initiatives that we go much further into to points where I probably can't share the level of detail and value that we generate. But one thing, for example, is I use PyRevit a lot. So for the first time in the public eye, here is PyRevit for Architectus. This is our in-house ribbon that I'm developing, and all of these things are Python-based tools. There's no Dynamo scripts hiding behind this. Most of these things either do very useful, scalable, or simple things that Revit doesn't naturally easily do. I won't click on every single button, and I probably won't be able to click on some of them without getting in trouble. But for example, like if I want to select a whole bunch of walls in an area of the model, most people would do this: filter, check none, walls, and then you've just got your walls. Way too many clicks in a model that's huge. That takes an ungodly amount of time to do. So I built a fun little tool called pre-select, which I can say I just want to pick walls. It puts me into an eye selection filter, and now I just hit my walls, finish, and I've got my walls. Way less memory intense, way easier to select things that matter. Another example of that tool used in a different way is sometimes maybe you want to clear all the annotations off a view. So how would you do that? Well, you could duplicate the view, but then it's a whole new view. So instead, I can say, well, I want things that are 2D, view specific. And now I can just select things that are specific to this view. And now I've got all my annotations. So you can go pretty far with that tool, for example, but it's all built on Python in the background. So it's pretty strong. So another example, like this is an old classic workflow, up revisioning or down revisioning sheets. PyRabbit lets you put user interfaces in there, so I can up revision, pick a revision, which sheets do I up rev. PyRabbit also supports things like loading bars, so you'll notice a little loading bar pops up in the top ribbon telling me how far it's going. At the moment, all those sheets have the revision on them, so nothing's happened. What's the other one I was going to show? You can do things like purge unused views in the model, so views not on sheet. Autodesk gave us a little icon saying when a view is not on a sheet. That's great, but I can't actually get those views still, so not very useful. So it scans all the views in the model, checks all their parents, all their callouts. So if a dependent view has a parent view and the parent view is not on a sheet, typically if you put a view browser organization on it, you would see the parent view, not the dependent view, and you can actually delete the parent view, which gets rid of the dependent view as well. So you have to scan a lot of different places. But now I can see all the views that aren't actually a part of this this model on sheets. So I can just save heaps of time. Obviously on a very large project, these tools take a little bit longer to run. One really great thing in PyRabbit is you can stop a script. You can just say, stop running at this point. If you've hit an error, don't try to run the whole script through and cause errors like Dynamo. Just stop when you hit a breakpoint. So there's a lot of really powerful things that I'll be able to share on the channel quite soon. Probably the last tool I'll show you here before I show you something else is if you're ever bulk editing title blocks, this is a really common problem. Like say you want to change all the north points in your project and using different title blocks, same shared parameter. Really, really annoying. You'd have to go sheet by sheet almost. Whereas if I want to just do like all my plans, I can actually go and use this tool, super select, grab all the title blocks on sheets, and then it selects all my title blocks. So I don't have to visit any of those sheets. So these are all like sort of pretty different tools to the way Revit naturally functions. So I've had a lot of fun doing this. I'll show maybe just one more thing. I probably won't show all the way into Rhino, but I might show Rhino inside because we do use quite a lot of Rhino where we work as well. The challenge with computation in architecture is that there's so many fringe cases and exceptions and things that are going to be different project to project. So a lot of what I do is identifying the workflows that are repeatable or scalable or just a tool that can be used anywhere without causing any issues. Because if everyone came back and told me, oh, you need to fix this tool, my job would just be that. I'd be fixing fringe cases all day. And this is just an example of a handy little script that just goes and collects all the rooms in a model and lets me bake in the surfaces. And then the surface is ready for analysis in our ESD workflows. So I've got my element ID, so I can recall that element if I need to and get more information using Rhino inside later. Using attributes. So I do a lot of sort of workflows like this for the company, whilst also doing still a fair bit of Dynamo, quite a bit of PyRabbit with the toolbar, and then also a lot of sneaky one-off things like adaptive components, the more tricky things that people don't typically have a basic experience in. So I thought I'd just show those as a couple of examples, given that people don't tend to get to see actually what we do in practice, but there's just an example. And I wanted to show the PyRabbit toolbar because I mean that feels pretty cool, right? Looks pretty good. And I know not too many people out there share their PyRabbit toolbar. I saw BIG, they shared I think a snapshot of theirs and everyone was like, oh, look at BIG's toolbar. So I was like, oh, we got to do that too. So so I got permission to share that luckily. So yeah, very cool. Yeah. So I think I just stopped my share. Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay.
Cool.
Yeah, that was super interesting. So I'm not sure if we talked about it before the stream or not, but you were starting your YouTube channel. You took a break that was back in July, so you took about a 6 months break.
Can you
explain the reason?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of, to some degree, reached a point where I think I taught a lot of what I was very experienced and comfortable teaching. I got to a point where I was like, well, I probably want to share some Rhino and Grasshopper. I probably want to share some PyRabbit, but I'd really only just dove into PyRabbit and I'd only really just started using Rhino professionally, again, with Architectus. And I thought, well, I can't really just go and pretend I'm an expert in these things on my videos I also knew I was going to be moving states, and there was a lot of stuff to coordinate there, and I just could see I was going to be coming to YouTube almost begrudgingly. So I'm not really
Hmm.
wanting to make the videos because it's just a
Yeah.
thing I have to do. And I thought rather than do
Yeah.
that,
It's not a good
I'll
place.
just sign off for a bit, tell everyone why I'm signing off, not just disappear into the wind like a lot of YouTubers have in the past,
Yeah.
and say I'll be back. Don't know when I'll be back. I could be 40, I could be 50, or it could be in 6 months. And it turned out it was in six
In
months.
in 20
So
years.
yeah, you never know, right? So I mean, I think like like the Rabbit Kid did the same thing. I remember he signed off for a while and then came back, and look how he's going now. He's booming. So
Uh-huh.
so it's always nice to communicate with the audience and say, just so you know, I'm not dead or anything. I'm still here. But and I think I told you, you can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter and all that. And I think I even ran out of time for most of that too. Minus just
Yeah, and I watched your comeback video, and I really like how you break down every single step. And from now on, the videos are going to be this way. I'm going to skip the camera intro. So I've liked that we just had your whole thought process, and
yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just tried to
it's
simplify
interesting.
everything because
Hmm.
I enjoyed doing those little intro outro segments, but like I realized eventually like I could probably just do a quick like PowerPoint at the start like I used to, and I'd probably
Hmm.
still get the same result. Like I know typically my videos are targeting mostly BIM managers, people who just want to just get right to it. Show me the
Yeah, yeah.
answers, show me how to do it. I don't need your star wipes and explosions from After Effects. I don't need all that stuff. I just need the answer. So I think I'm going to go back to the more standard format and just sort of accept that this is what I really enjoy doing, I guess, in what I produce. So hopefully people will
The,
enjoy some of
so
that.
so the standard format for you, it's like about 20 minutes video with a few slides and then a live demo or so on.
Yeah, typically time's a bit of a funny one for me. Sometimes it might be like an 8 minute video, and sometimes
Hmm.
it might go out to like 45 minutes. I think I did a window tutorial once that blew out to like an hour.
Hmm.
So like I try not to make content that is any longer than it needs to be. But yeah, probably 20 is like my goal. I know my Pyrovit videos are going to go over 20 minutes because like to explain all the
Hmm.
concepts in those scripts is quite a slow process. Someone did actually say, like, well, if we don't know much Python, like, can we watch your videos? Are they going to make sense? And I said, well, no, you'll probably need to watch, my foundational Python videos, and there'll be
Foundational
some
Python,
steps
yeah.
to get there. But I'd try to at least explain, this is what this is why I'm doing it. But I'm not going to say like variable equals 5 and explain what a variable is and why I say equals and why it's 5 and not 5 as a
Hmm.
string. Like, there's going to be certain steps I'll probably just do and other ones that I'll have to explain. But yeah,
Yeah,
hopefully
it's
I can. Yeah.
one of my goals for next year to properly learn Python. I can mess around. I can take existing code and mess up a couple of lines, but it's because I had a Python course like 10 years ago, but not even related to Revit. So I do understand the principles of coding on Python a little bit, but I haven't applied. Didn't have enough time, honestly, to apply it. But it's on my to-do list for sure. Have you tried playing with C Sharp?
I have, and
Uh-huh.
I guess Python versus C Sharp was an interesting choice for me because I look at C Sharp, I see the power, I see the speed, and I guess you are talking much more closely to applications and computers. And I did a fair bit of research on it. I did a whole bunch of tutorials, and I just sort of went, man, this is just like I come from Python, and I was like, man, I can
Uh-huh.
see the value, I can see it.
Not
But
fun for
and then
you.
I found Pyrovit, and I was like, oh, like this is just like the middle
Yeah.
ground. I'm going to stay here for a bit. I
Hmm.
might go to C Sharp. I find that there are some things that like Pyrovit does very well that aren't necessarily the way applications are deployed and developed. So Pyrovit, for
Hmm.
example, you can put it on a server, point your whole company to it, and if you change a tool and they reopen Revit, they've got the update straight away. There's no like, please download this EXE, run the EXE, or run the MSI, or the IT has to automate something. So there are some like natural benefits I found, whilst understanding that there are some serious speed limitations you do accept in this, and there's safety mechanisms you put in, such as like loading bars and cancel buttons to make sure if someone goes and runs a process, it's going to take 20 minutes, they can go, oh, actually, maybe not. so if you make a giant loop that does something like put an escape mechanism
Hmm.
inside the loop to help people not, crash out their project, so that it's a conscious choice I made. I think the main reason I want to learn a new language now is probably to work with the web.
Hmm.
So that would either be Forge, which is
Hmm.
unlikely, or JS to look at actually
Hmm.
building web apps. And I see the future
Yeah,
in there.
interesting.
I definitely see that the web is just the grand connector. It's what hooks everything together. I mean, Speckle as an example of a platform that's proven it really
Hmm.
is the way to go. Like I think that's probably if I was going to pick another language like JS or JavaScript would be the place to
Yeah.
go for me. I wouldn't say C Sharp is necessarily fading. Someone commented that maybe a little
Yeah.
bit, but it does have a bit of age behind it. But at the same time, it is still very close to talking to a computer, at least a Windows computer. You can manage memory and threads and all sorts of things that other languages don't focus on as much as hide them from you. So
Yeah,
yeah,
well, if you want to learn C sharp for building add-ins in Revit, I would recommend Michael Kilkelly. He now has kind of a bootcamp style learning where you build on your add-in with him. So if you're interested in C sharp, Michael is the guy. Michael Kilkelly from Archmarter. I do have a pretty good live episode with him. You can
yeah,
get
I
that
enjoyed that one. That was a great one. That's actually where I was sort
in
of
the
playing around with
archives.
C Sharp, and it really helped give a bit of context. But C Sharp also, there's a lot to learn pretty much like at the start. Like you have to
Yeah,
learn Visual Studio, you have to learn how
yeah,
applications work, how
it's a
computers work.
lot. Yeah, it's too much
Whereas
for me.
Python, they just like, here's some variables, have fun. And you mentioned too that you learned from just looking at other people's code, and that's how I started too.
Yeah.
I actually started opening up Dynamo nodes that had Python in them and said, oh, how did they do this? And I learned the foundational concepts from a website called DataCamp, which was okay. Then I took everything I learned and put it on YouTube for free, so that no one else had to go to DataCamp.
So you said you were using Speckle. So
Yeah.
what do you do with it? I did have a session with Matteo, who was on the team over at Speckle, and I had on one of my projects with one of my clients, we've been using this platform as well. It was for a carbon calculator, but I'm curious what you've been up to with this platform.
To be honest, where I work currently, we're not really using Speckle in any controlled environment, so we're not really using it in a project environment. It's still very much at a business case point. I look at it and it makes immediate sense to me, but with it comes the requirement for people to understand what data is, how data travels, what types of data make sense in which environments. And I think if I could really like sell the right people on it, we could probably look at it as at the very least like a data pipeline between platforms that aren't necessarily as intuitively a BIM platform. So like Excel to Revit to Rhino is very much a round trippable scenario between Speckle, and we know most architects are still very much locked in on Excel. So it's a very easy way to port data between them. Their model viewer is super strong. I'm amazed how fast it is with shadows. That was something that wasn't there last time I opened it up, and I see a lot of potential in there. There's IFC.js and there's other platforms that are building web viewing applications too. But their viewer is super intuitive. You can embed it on websites, on PowerPoint.
Well, what I understood from it, they told me, as I understand reading between the lines, that they don't really like the IFC format, and they've built this like IFC sucks, so we're gonna take the raw data of everything, bring it together in a single platform, and you can use a Speckle API to interact with it instead of trying to mess with IFC, which has its limitation. So what do you think about that? About IFCs and its potential
I think
limitation?
Speckle made the right choice by saying that why limit ourselves to one schema when we could just say, here they all are, you do the connecting. Because I always think that we're going to end up at a point where everyone's just going to be building a mapping table to say this is that, and this is that, and this is that, and we're just going to pass the data from an apple to an orange, but we're going to tell the orange it's an apple before we do it. And IFC doesn't necessarily work that way as it comes. You can definitely make it work that way using tools like Blender BIM and IFC.js for sure. What IFC did well is it gave us something to work with, I guess. It said this is the standard, this is a schema. It is being managed by XYZ organization. It has some custody, it has some responsibility. Whereas, there's other formats or movements that tried to maintain Revit standards, for example, and they just never lasted. IFC suffers to me from the fact that it doesn't really have great support in many other platforms. It's great to look at. A viewer can do really quick interpretations of an IFC file, but to go and generate a clean IFC, it's like you're jumping through hoops for days at a company that typically wouldn't really have much benefit from an IFC internally. So then you need the external parties to put the pressure on to make IFCs required. And again, that doesn't always happen either. They might say we need IFC and that's it. And it's like, cool, export IFC, done. Whereas if they start saying, where's all the properties and where's all this? Well, it's like, someone's just going to say, well, we don't know how to do it. Can you show us? And they'll go, no, we don't have time. And you end up with the same problem. So I think there's a bit of a holding point for IFC until the industry as a whole averagely gets serious about it. I see a lot of government organizations asking for it. I don't know
Yeah.
how much they use it versus just looking at it. That's the question I have for IFC as well. What are we doing with the IFC minus looking at it? So yeah, it has potential to become the only way things are done down the line, but yeah, right now it's a long way off. Yeah. How about
Yeah.
yourself? Have you had any encounters with IFC?
IFC, it's mostly used as an in between platforms, and it's yeah, it's hit and miss. That's what Skyward DX says in the chat as well. Hit and miss for me as well.
Mm.
Not that easy to use. When I export it, not that sure how it's going to be used. Yeah, what Spigala are doing is pretty interesting. Like to just forget about the format. I think the format still has its use, but
Mm.
they have a pretty interesting approach. So if you're curious, watch the episode I did with Matteo last summer, and he just explained the whole thing, why
Yeah.
he didn't say it
Another
this
really
way,
smart
but
thing. Oh, sorry, you go. Yeah.
yeah, he didn't say he didn't like IFCs, but that's kind of what I got.
Yeah,
Trying
the
to.
other thing to remember too with platforms like Speckle, like if you look at the whole industry of software and data, AEC is like so small. Like there's a
Hmm.
huge market out there to capture.
Hmm.
So they're smart in that they said,
Hmm.
no one in banking uses IFC. Like it's not a format that's relevant beyond AEC for the most
Yeah,
part.
yeah, exactly.
So they're smart in that they've built an architecture that isn't limited to architecture per se. So I think that that's a smart choice. I collaborated with a platform called Toric a while ago too, who now partnered with Autodesk, and they had the same vision. They said, why limit ourselves to the way one industry works when we can say data is fluid? And now we're just trying to say, how can we get this data to talk to other data or platforms? So it was very a smart choice, I think.
Mm. Yes, Cover DX's ArchiCAD IFC export from Revit seems to work well, the native
Yep.
IFC export.
It does, yeah.
Interesting.
There's an add-in that Nemetschek provides that exports IFCs, and they've captured a few of the issues that the default exporter doesn't quite
Mm-hmm.
pick up on. So yeah, they're right. That's typically what we would use at Architectus if we were doing an IFC export, in addition to some pre-mapping and property set setups if we need to. Mm.
All right.
So,
So having a look at the list of
mm.
oral topics, we're not doing too bad so far.
Yeah,
Generative design, it was one of the things on our list.
yeah, this is
So
a fun.
and what I wonder if you was the flop of generative design. Want to
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
that's what we
that?
call it, another flop. Yeah, I think it's a funny one. I mean, generative design, it has potential, but it doesn't necessarily respond to the sensibilities of how we work. So to build a generative approach to design, you almost need design to be standardized to a point where you can reuse that tool over and over again. I mean, TestFit, for example, you could,
Mm-hmm.
they say they're not generative design, and I agree. They're using an algorithm to go through a bunch of things. You're not really driving the algorithm per se. You're driving some of the properties to say this is what I want you to change. But I think that's the biggest challenge we found. Even at Architectus, we've used it from time to time, but there is that upfront investment to develop the workflow for the project. It's never, hey, we've got to make my building workflow and it's going to work in every city in the world and it responds to every planning regulation under the sun. It's just not possible. You always need to customize these things. So I think there are some companies that are trying to make it work. I know that Evolve Lab,
Yeah,
they're
Evolve Lab. Yeah.
pushing their I think what do they call it, Glyph. I think they call it. I think it's embedded in their Glyph
Yep.
program, and they got the top speaker at AU, I think too. So they must have obviously turned some heads.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's, but they've proven that to make it work, they had to systemize their own generative tool and just say this is how it works and this is what it does. You've got your parking generator, for example, the usual generative design example that we all solved 15 years ago. But they're expanding on that with their own takes on what generative design is good at, like duct routing and optimization. So
Yeah, exactly. I actually saw them live at AU this year, and they had a few really good talks. And one of them, it was an image of someone throwing the baby out with the bad water, and it was generative design on top of the baby. So are we gone? So we just decided generative design not that good, but actually, is it if it's well implemented, it can be useful. So they've talked about this tool that they developed for automating docs, for example.
Yep.
And it made sense, like in the way they've explained it. More so, it's just generative design sounds like a black box, like you're not really sure what's going on, and you just put in a few things and it generates an output, like almost magically. But and Clifton from TestFit like to use the word configurator.
Yep.
Like it kind of makes more sense. The user still has control of all the inputs. It's just a way to automate the little things, so
Yeah.
you save a little bit of time, more so than generative design, which is more you're not too sure where that's coming from, almost.
Yeah, and I guess they in common with Lyft, they said we're going to pick a very specific task to apply this towards in a generative way.
Hmm.
But we're not just making it a here's your magic design tool that says whatever you ask it to do. I mean, ScaleDX summarized it well too, saying that architecture is a visually driven exercise,
Hmm.
a profession, and generative
Yeah.
design is definitely scares people quite quickly when you zoom out and show them the amount of spaghetti required to just make
Yeah.
a box with a window because you're typically not taking like a BIM model and saying, okay, move my stuff in my Revit model around. You're generating geometry and analyzing that geometry, and it's all very raw. And usually you're not going to make it look pretty because you're like, I just want to make this algorithm and I don't care how it looks. I just want the answer. So it's a good point as well that people can get a bit scared off by the spaghetti and the complexity quite quickly. And the generative design has the most sticky people that don't want to use programming. That's like the
Yeah.
end user, and programmers don't really want to help those people that much. They want them to understand a bit more about programming so we can work more closely together. And generative design's a bit of a like, la la la, don't talk to me. I just want to do my thing and give me a magic tool that gives me my magic building. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, let's meet in the middle and we can develop an algorithm for the project, and it's just a much better outcome.
Yeah, there's that tool in Revit, in generative design. So it's more than a year. I haven't played with it, to be honest. Like,
I was at a
I've
presentation I did
uh-huh.
on GD to a small group, and I said, hands up if you've used the Revit generative design tool, and all the hands went up. And I said, any on projects? All the hands went down.
Everyone just tried it, and no
Yeah, there
real
was an
application.
Autodesk rep there, and they didn't look too happy. But I will note the hand did go down as well.
All right, so generative design, we'll see about it. But yeah, I would
So,
refer to Evolve Lab. I've talked to them recently this fall, and they have got some pretty good AU presentation as well. And all right, so someone in the chat dialing says BIM plus ChatGPT. It was on our to-do list to talk about it.
it's on our list. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So to me, in I wrote a recap of my year favorite posts, most popular posts, and live videos and so on. And I talk about AI as well. I've been extremely impressed, generally speaking, with AI. First, with the image generating tools that came out mostly earlier this year, and I've been playing with Midjourney recently, and it's pretty impressive. I've got to say.
Yeah.
And there's a whole issue about rights when it comes to artists. I know because basically you can take any image from any artist and you can type in make it in the style of this artist and it will. So there's definitely a debate about it, about intellectual rights and property of the art, but still it's quite amazing what this can do. I didn't expect this at all, it
Yeah.
was not on what I expected AI would automate at first. I thought AI, if you asked me like a few years ago, I thought it would solve all the boring manual tasks. But the irony of it seems that the biggest challenge for AI or robots might be kind of tedious manual task. Turns out human, we can do a lot of the way we movements and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty hard to do for the bots, but the
Yeah.
creating art's apparently not so hard. That surprised me this year.
Yeah.
What do you
I had
think?
way too much fun on I think it's Crayon or
Hmm.
CRAIYON, just making silly pictures of things that should never
Yeah,
be
yeah.
made. But it was good fun, watching Darth Vader fight Spider-Man and just silly things like that. Watching Gordon Ramsay get angry about something. There was a lot of things. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, AI is a funny one because it's sort of been around for a long time as an entertained notion and also a pursuit notion. I mean, you've got Watson from IBM on Jeopardy about what that was about probably 10, 15 years ago, something. That was a long time ago. And he was able to compete with the contestants by resourcing the internet, just like all these other AI things are doing now. So it's definitely been there, but I guess it went from a novel concept to hey, this might actually be applicable to everyday people now. And I think that ChatGPT definitely showed people, oh, like, you know, like if I'm a copywriter, oof, I'm scared of ChatGPT because it's basically just like DIY copywriter. Like, it's going to be like that's the first industry I reckon will go if AI does grip one, like copywriting. Because I can just go and ask it to write me something. That's literally what a copywriter does. So there's some really interesting threats and challenges to our
Yeah.
industry. And I'm glad you mentioned rights and permission, because I think that's
Hmm.
the biggest grey area that's probably going to come back and bite a lot of people that, you know, go and try to promote their AI creations as their own, legally selling them, like, you know, actually attaching value to them. You know, we already saw the NFT craze, and everyone goes, "Hey, don't save my JPG, that's mine." It's like
Yeah.
it's just a reincarnation of that same trend. Then, as we saw, nothing happened. You just steal their image, and no one can do anything because there's no regulation around it.
Hmm.
So, my question next will be, what is going to be the regulation? I mean, they didn't even put regulation around NFTs, crypto. They still haven't managed to regulate it. So it's like, how long is it going to take to protect artists from this? I guess, or are they going to start putting their images on websites that aren't reachable by these algorithms on the dark web? Are artists going to become like this sort of fragment of society that breaks away and, you know, becomes very niche, very inaccessible? It'll be interesting,
Yeah.
I guess, to see.
Well, just for the images, something I've read is that some of apparently, well, that's what the AI makers are claiming, but they're not even using like the reference images that much anymore because they've
Yeah.
already learned most of what they need to learn. So the fact that they have access to existing art or not doesn't affect them anymore. So it seems inevitable that it's going to progress more and more.
Yep. Yep. It's only
So
going to grow. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The
it's going
question
to
is
affect
how
our industry,
fast,
but
I guess, is the one I have. Like, how quickly will we see this grow? Like, have we seen something that was actually a long way in development already, and they've just said, "Here's a snapshot of what's going on"?
yeah.
Because I think that's what we've seen right now. Like, they didn't start making OpenAI like yesterday. It's got a fair bit of history in it, and they've probably been building a lot of these algorithms and components that build it all together for quite a while now. So whether it's going to be tomorrow that we're all out on the streets looking for new work, you know, help a bit manager out sort of thing, or I think it's maybe, you know, a little bit more stretched out than what maybe people are worrying about. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder in our industry, does it mean that let's say 10 years, 15, 20 years, like the idea of having someone who's managing like the line styles or that kind of stuff in the drawings,
God, I hope
it's
not.
gonna be obsolete and the AI is gonna just you type in basically I have an assistant. Like wouldn't it be cool to have an assistant in Revit, like a chat GPT? Can you like change all the line styles to provide me something graphically pleasing,
Yeah, like
please? And
ISO
yeah, sure,
28, whatever. Yeah.
done.
Well, it's funny too, because I mean, like, to some degree, that's like us delegating responsibility away to something else,
Hmm.
and it makes me think about the line weight table in Revit and how
Hmm.
they gave us those 16 weights and said, "That's it, that's all you've got.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you got to work with these." And since then, I mean, from the AutoCAD days to now, the amount of firms I've heard saying, "Man, our line weights suck," because they just gave it to the computer effectively and said, "Who cares? It's part of the program now." And now everyone's frustrated with it. So it's like, do we water down quality and accept it for what it is? Because I think to some degree AI is giving us that. It's very, like you said, it's a general thing. It's not a specific thing usually. In where excels, it's not built to do one thing, it's built to do everything. So it's more of a jack of all trades versus a master of none. So do we just accept the watering down of quality
Hmm.
on these things that, you know, we really don't want to do ourselves? Let's be honest. I mean, line weights, line patterns, object styles, forget about it. I don't want to know. I've done it once, never want to do it again. So to some degree, like, we're happy to give these things away, but it's like, do we sacrifice the quality a person's judgment
Yeah.
provides by doing it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see. I just wonder how long it's going to take until
Yeah.
it takes over. It seems just inevitable that it's gonna come. Not necessarily take all of our jobs, but it's just gonna affect
Change
the way we
them.
work for sure.
It'll definitely change our jobs.
Hmm.
I mean, my best guess is maybe it's like 5 years is probably the first point we might see some serious, all right, well, we're in a bit of trouble now, sort of thinking.
Hmm.
Right now, they're using AI to some degree in construction. I know they use it for risk management and assessment and
Hmm.
identifying trends and saying, okay, you're likely on this job to have at least 3 accidents, so allow for your insurance to do X, Y, Z. Some of that's very basic machine learning. It's, you know, it's just linear interpolation, if anyone knows. the basics of ML, AI, deep learning, whereas other ones are much more complicated and they're building very large and intelligent data sets to inform these things. So I think that like we're seeing some intrusion, but really it's more of an aid to people. It's never a replacement for people. It's just like now I have more understanding of what I didn't have before, or I don't have to waste my time on X. I can do it on this. Like programming, I mean, programming came along and people are still documenting. Like it hasn't taken it away by any means. It's helped us do some things faster. But
and aids, it seems to be like the way it's gonna be for a while. An aid, just an assistant, your own personal assistant. What are your thoughts when it comes to programming? I've tried it a little bit, and so it's funny because I saw one post saying this is amazing, it can program everything, and then the post after that, it was from BirdTool, I think, saying no, it sucks. Like everything, like all the instructions are wrong. The code it gives doesn't make any sense. It's terrible. And I played with it, and I think it's kind of having a friend next to you that knows a little bit about coding, can give you a few advice, but it maybe is a little bit out of experience or something.
Yeah, so I think the answer is only as good as the question, right? Like if you ask it the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong answer. It's like, have you ever watched your parents use Google before and they're like, oh, I never get the result that I need. And you watch them type it in and it's like, how do I find a store and they put in like an essay and the algorithm's like, what do I do with this? There's too many words. Like it's finding the strong words and just taking 3 words that matter and searching those instead. It's the same thing with AI, like unless you're very specific. So if you already sort of know the answer you're trying to get to, it can give you a pretty good answer. If you don't even know the basic programming you're working with, like it's not going to know what you're trying to ask it because you can't even use like the keywords that it's like, okay, now we're talking. Like if I said, oh, I want to get all walls in the model and put a dimension on them, it's like, what does that even mean? Like, what are those walls doing? Like or if I say, if I have 4 walls in a row, they're all parallel, and you comma each of those things, and you say, I want to collect all those 4 walls that I can see in my view and put 1 dimension on them using their references, you could probably do that. But you sort of almost have to lay the same sort of programmatic logic in a sequence that it can go, okay, I understand that we're dealing with syntax, we're saying do this, then that, then that. But if you just say dimension my walls, it's going to give you like, it'll just give you a collector for all the walls in the document, and it'll just say make a dimension on like those walls, and it would just give you like some ridiculous thing that the API doesn't ever support because we don't work that way either. So I think that it's going to become a very good programming aid to programmers that sort of roughly know what they're trying to do. They know roughly how they do it, but they don't want to make 6 typos and sit there figuring out where the typos are. I think it's going to be great for that. I think it's probably going to be better for more modern programming languages because that's probably where a lot of content is being generated for like now. Whereas if it's dealing with like older concepts, it's going to be dealing with much more content and much more variable quality of content as well. So like the Revit API has been around a while, so it's probably going to make more mistakes than if it was trying to do like a web query or something like that. So it's got potential for coders, but I guess too, like, I mean, a coder's really going to code themselves out of a job using their own tool. I don't know. Like I wouldn't, I just make my job easier. So yeah, I'm not too worried as a programmer. Yeah.
We've got Dylan in the chat saying Revit chatbot. Yeah, what about instead of having to go open Dynamo and put all the nodes, you just type in, hey, can you take all the walls and that have this value in the comments field and set them to this type instead of this one?
I think you need like a very specific like tool built to handle that, because those sorts of things you're saying to the computer don't necessarily just translate easily to the right command.
I guess there would be an interface that transferred this language into the Revit API, and then it does it.
You'd almost need to post-program like the types of words that relate to certain commands and find like the closest match from like a sentence someone just gave to a computer, like using natural language processing, which is basically what GPT is doing as well, and figure out what that actually means. And like, I think too, if you're doing like very small, intricate changes that involve a lot of things at once, you're not going to be able to just do that in a voice command. Like, because, you know, when you're doing design, you're doing lots of little movements and changes, and to try and tell a computer to that would be such a pain. You'd be like, computer, move all, bit to the left, not that far, bit to the right, bit more, just to get it like roughly exactly what you want it to be. Like
Yeah, well, that meme of the architect saying to the intern, yeah, move the toilet a little bit.
yeah, yeah, they got
Yeah,
the
it
gift,
moves.
yeah. And
No,
like
the other
even
way.
just
The
like
other way.
and like move the toilet to the other wall, and it's like, and the computer's just like, which wall? And you're like, oh, the one that's 90 degree, and you have to give it some sort of mathematical instruction so it can measure the angle it's looking like. It'll be very specific driving this computer. Like most voice commands in Revit that I've seen, because people have actually built them, they just like open model
Yeah.
called this, and it's like that's useless. Like you got to get in a model, and then you can't do anything else. You got to get on the computer. So
All
it's
right.
like,
Well, the challenge for people in the chat: can you build a smart Revit chatbot that's using the latest AI and so we can replace Dynamo completely?
yeah.
We'll see. That's your challenge.
Yeah, because it won't drive Dynamo either. It would just like talk to the API directly. If you want to build a
Exactly.
tool
Yeah.
like that, you
Exactly.
do away with it. Whereas if anything, I think Dynamo is closer to the endpoint for simple automation in Revit. Like I think if people don't want to use Dynamo, then you don't want to automate Revit. Full stop. Just buy a third-party solution and don't worry about it. Is usually my sort of answer to people these days. If they go, oh, I used ChatGPT and the code didn't work, and we've actually had Dynamo forums. I've had a few of these already, and I'm always just like, if you just want to talk to a chatbot and get you an answer, like either outsource it to someone that can do it, or just pay for a third-party solution. Don't waste your time. Don't waste other people's time. The program isn't there yet. It's not that sophisticated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dylan says that the chatbot would know English to Revit API. Anyway,
language, yeah, good point. Language, yeah.
We'll see about this. So, okay, have we gone through most of it? I see it's in 909. So
talk about some business movements. I guess there was a few Autodesk business movements that we saw during the year. There was I guess first of all there was the movements with Enscape and
yeah. What do you think about Twinmotion?
Yeah.
Have you played with Twinmotion? I haven't had time to use it.
Yeah, I've used it quite a bit. So I've played around with it heaps. It's great for stereo panoramic rendering. I haven't really used it for animation too much. I've been looking at material mapping.
Is it as good as Enscape?
Depends what you want to use it for. Like Enscape's great if you just want to jump out of the model really quickly and generate an experience that's, let's be honest, not photoreal, not that great. Like there's much better quality you can get from like putting more work in 3D Max or another program like that. Whereas Twinmotion to me is like middle ground. There's a great plugin called Datasmith that can take pretty much most model formats and get a pretty logical structure of elements into Twinmotion. Like there's a tree of objects and they sort of name themselves pretty well. All the families know that they're of a particular type and you've still retained that information so you can swap them all out with different chairs. It comes with heaps of materials and people, just like Enscape. It does have animated assets, so you can do like fly-throughs where the people aren't just like, standing still really creepily. So like there's definitely some pretty strong benefits. Not having to rely on the Revit model being 100% perfect is probably the main reason I like things like Twinmotion. Like you don't have to go and get your lights in Revit to be perfect. You can just go, it's never going to work. Let's just use an inbuilt lighting system in the software. Works. Like I love Enscape, don't get me wrong. But there are some benefits to these gaming engines, Unreal, Twinmotion. There's some pretty strong benefits. Whereas Enscape's made a very strong commitment to making the model the driver of the outcome. Whereas Twinmotion says get your stuff in and then go to town and have fun with it, which takes more time. But I think
which is a little more like Lumion, I guess. I've played with Lumion quite a lot.
Yeah, very much like Lumion, probably a good comparison. Twinmotion, I guess, because it is like the child of Unreal Engine, I think is probably a more future-proofable choice because it will teach you the very basics of working with a game design engine. Because I think Unreal and probably Omniverse and some of those platforms, they're going to completely take the market by storm in the next maybe 5.
Yeah, you did play with Unreal Engine a little bit, right?
Yeah, so much fun. I was mostly looking at the programming side. My favorite thing about Unreal, to try and explain it in terms of someone that's never used it, is it's a game design engine. So you put things in, you load things, you map things, you do all the stuff you do in like any old game design engine. But you can program these things very easily. So you can make a door, and you can put a program inside the door, and that tells the door if you come within X distance, the door opens. And then you can place thousands of these doors. You have one little piece of code in the door that controls that action. So you can build what they call the blueprints in Unreal, and you can basically program little pieces of your experience. So it's almost like having a little Dynamo script in object that you make. Like imagine being able to embed a Dynamo script in a family, and the Dynamo script can go and do things that you wouldn't be able to do in the family editor, like drive strings with numbers and all those things we wish we could do. That's sort of what it's like in Unreal. So I really enjoyed that. And also just being able to build an experience instead of a render. That's where I think the future of visualization will end up at, because clients know what can be done now. And they're going, well, the last person I was on, they gave me a game controller and said, walk around. And, some firm gives them a still render. It's going to look pretty bad. Like it'll be like handing a plan to your client when renders were around. It's going to be the same parallel, I think, if we go far enough ahead. Yeah.
Interesting discussions. In the chat, from Scour, so far Enscape is the easiest to get into from a lot of feedback from my users.
Yep, agree. Yeah.
Twinmotion lends itself to AR, VR if you want to walk your clients through things. Is Twinmotion the Enscape killer?
Good question.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty big move from Autodesk. I'm not sure how much the Enscape team like this move. Although I think the SketchUp market is a pretty big one as well.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I don't want to read between the lines too much, and I have no confirmation on this, so this is just pure speculation. But if you look at the timeline of the Chaos Group acquisition of Enscape and the Twinmotion partnership with Autodesk, I think there was some connection between that business movement. I think like my best guess is probably Enscape approached Autodesk, said, "Would you like to partner?" Like most of our users are Revit users probably, so it would make sense to get closer to that company. And maybe there was a no thanks. Maybe they already were talking to Epic about collaboration, because Autodesk does work with game design as well. So there's definitely a bigger market to hold with partnering with Epic. So maybe that was like a part of that landscape, and that's why they went to Chaos Group, because the next best person is a 3D rendering company that already has a lot of competition in the market, like V-Ray, and they can benefit from sharing engines and code and things like that now. So there's definitely some connection between those market movements, I expect.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But no confirmation.
I think in the case of Chaos, it was I've heard they're described as a merger. So it's not really one acquired the other. So they just merged.
Yeah, they tried very hard in their articles to describe it very carefully, because they were like, neither of us are umbrellaing the other one. We're working together. I guess it's almost like a consortium sort of agreement, I'm guessing, in how they're collaborating. It was interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'll be keen to see where Enscape goes, I guess. I feel like as a platform, it's reached a bit of a ceiling. Like its features are more about just making it an easier program to use and making it a smoother program to use. Whereas I'll be curious to see what extra features they can add to it to justify the ever creeping subscription costs and other things that come with those sort of platforms. So yeah, watching it with interest.
Yeah, me too. All right, so tokens, the shift to the cloud and tokens.
Tokens, yes.
What do you think about tokens?
They scare me. They're worse than subscriptions, right? If they become the only option, I don't know if Autodesk or the AEC industry shoots itself in the foot first. I'm not sure which one.
So for those who don't know what we're talking about, is it like this year that Autodesk announced you can get access to Revit? It's one of the options, but paying a token. So it's how much time you're using Revit, and you pay by usage instead of paying for a yearly license. And so
inflated costs, much more expensive. I think it's a good option for people that just want to jump on Revit for a bit, but you've got a minimum token spend. So it's not for someone that wants to be on Revit for like 5 minutes. It's for someone that wants to be on Revit for 5 minutes every day for the next 5 years, once every month or something like that. It works for them, but it doesn't work for someone that just wants to jump on for like 5 minutes and that's it. So because you can only purchase, I forget what the minimum amount is, but it's sort of the equivalent of roughly just buying Revit for a year, if I remember correctly, for a normal subscription. So it's an interesting business model. I'm not sure who it suits yet. That's the one thing. I don't know what the market fit is. So I'm just watching the price of the token to see what happens, because
I guess it's for project managers and
maybe people. Yeah. I mean, they're usually just going to expect you to get them in 360 license anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not too sure what's the idea behind it. What's the difference between CC and token? I don't know. What are CC?
Like the cloud, or maybe?
Not sure what CC is.
Uh, Creative Cloud. I don't know. I'm so used to CC being Creative Cloud and Adobe. So
Yeah, that's what I associated to as well.
yeah, I mean, if they're talking about ACC and tokens, I mean, BIM 360 is still its own model. I think I don't think tokens were for the cloud services. I think they were just for you've got tokens for Forge. I think if I remember right, that's how you purchase Forge time. But I think they're mainly for the hub, like the software that you put onto your computer specifically. Yeah, cloud credit. Okay, cloud credit. I think they're separate. I think they hold separate currencies. Cloud credit historically was for rendering, I believe, predominantly. Whereas this is a whole new system. And the interesting part about a token is that it gives them complete regulation over the value of their access. That's
Hmm.
the interesting part about tokenization. It's much easier to not transparently change your prices if all you deal with is tokens because you have to monitor those tokens and their value. It's like a cryptocurrency to some degree. So I'm a bit skeptical about,
Yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like it, but it's
yeah.
not, right? It's not. I don't think it's
Mm.
a cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm really skeptical about it is because you go back X years and yeah, perpetual licenses and
Hmm.
subscription was offered as an option if you wanted to do it. And, it's going to suit some people, it's not going to suit
Yeah.
everyone. And what do you know? It had to suit everyone. So are tokens what is it, the canary in the coal mine, as we say? Are we just going to have to sit there and hope it doesn't become the only thing? Autodesk has
Hmm.
said it's not, don't worry, we're just doing subscriptions. But again, we got told the same thing about perpetuals. Don't worry, it's just an option. So once bitten, twice shy. So hopefully, subscriptions remain because I think in the long run, subscriptions were probably actually better, even if just for the management
Hmm.
sake of licensing. They definitely have taken a lot of pain out of managing all the software
Hmm.
through the subscription basis, having cloud access, account-based access, commercial license access. That's definitely taken a lot of pain out. But at the same time, it's hard to compare economies then and now and know if it really was, cheaper or just easier to use and whether time is money. But I think in the long term, subscription was not the worst move, like for them and us. But at the same time, tokens, I can't necessarily get behind that one myself yet as an alternative. Yeah.
All right, we got David clarifying it for us. We're not quite up to date with everything. Cloud credits are being discontinued and replaced with tokens. There you go. Thanks, David.
And wonder what the conversion rate is when you cash in. So I've still got a few cloud credits from university, probably.
All right, so I think we'll start to wrap this up. It's 9:20 here. Um, I'm curious, what do you want to learn next year? Is there something you would like to get into? Like in my case, I mentioned I would like to get into Python coding. What about you?
Yeah. Oh, if you do, let me know. I'll definitely give you some resources and tips and
Sure.
things. Probably experience design is probably the area that interests me the most. I really did just play with Unreal. I am pushing in-house where I work now for what potential this could offer some projects specifically. So actually realizing its value a little bit more clearly. There are some people at Architects that already use it as a medium on projects, but to find a scalable way to make this a service or a business as usual would be really exciting. I think that's probably the main area. Maybe JS. I haven't quite realized if I want to do web dev yet. I've seen the challenges and the quirks and the frustrations that come with it, but they're probably the two areas that would interest me the most next year. So not much Revit, I guess.
What's the second one? JS?
JavaScript. So
Oh yeah,
looking into
JavaScript. Oh yeah.
even if just to look at data portability
Yeah.
as using it as a medium or SQL servers, looking at passing data to the web at least as a medium. But Speckle, is probably a very easy way to do it regardless. So yeah, probably developing my knowledge there. Yeah, yeah. See how we go.
All right. So I think we'll. Okay, short burst question.
Sure.
One of the point was favorite tools, art, music, book, podcasts, movies. So we
Yeah.
don't have to name one for everyone, but is there
Sure.
something specific, movies, music that you really enjoyed this year and you wanted to mention?
In movies for me has to be the Batman. I'm a huge
Hmm.
Batman fan, and that movie spoke volumes to me as a Silver Age Batman fan specifically.
Yeah, and we see the poster behind you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and Robert Pattinson, he killed it. I'll give it to him. Like, I mean, he was in Twilight, and I was like, and then I saw him in Tenet, and I remember my partner looked at me and I said, he can do it. He can do this. I believe in him. And I came out of that cinema and I'm like, he nailed it. Like, he's like my favorite young Batman ever portrayed in anywhere outside the comics. Put it that way, which is a big thing to wear. I mean, podcast for me was Troxel or TRXL.
Yeah, yeah.
That one
Listen to a
really,
few
I
now.
listened to. I binged it through the year. I just caught up on most of the episodes I hadn't heard, and I keep up to date on it. I think anyone in AEC, I highly recommend Troxel as a podcast.
Yeah,
It's
that's
very
a good one.
relevant, and it doesn't just talk about BIM. It talks about AEC like as a profession as well. So it's a bit more grounded than pure digital focus. Not that there's anything wrong with that, given that we're here on a digital focus podcast, technically, or vidcast, I guess, whatever you call it. Yeah, and then I think the other one was career highlights, and probably for me that was presenting at BILT or the Build
Yep.
Conference in Australia. That was my first conference presentation. I haven't been to AU before, maybe one day, and that was a real highlight for me. Just talking to a bigger audience and walking around the stage, and it was a nice experience. Yeah.
Yeah, well, me too. This year I had to conference. I went to Build in Anaheim, which is suburbs of LA.
Yeah.
Um,
Was that your brick facade presentation?
No, that was about model groups. I was talking about
Oh,
modular workflows,
okay.
and then AU in September, where I talked about brick patterns. It was a lot of work though to prepare for two conferences. So next year I'll only be doing one, probably AU. I've enjoyed both, but AU, I felt it was more people from all around the world, like more international guests. With Build, since there are regional conferences, it was
Definitely, it's more
mostly
niche.
people
Yeah.
from North America. So,
Yeah.
like, I really enjoy seeing everyone. Like, but it's usually the usual players that
Yeah.
I see all the time at these conferences, which is really nice. But at AU, there was a little more people from all around the world as well
Yeah.
that I've got to meet. Like there's this team Slantis from Uruguay
Oh, yeah.
that
Yeah.
they're super cool, and I've got to meet with them, and then
You wouldn't
even
be able to meet them otherwise, I guess, right? That's the only place it really happens, like to that scale. Yeah. So,
yeah, exactly. Like it's so I mean, like the downside, it's not a downside, but it's a corporate event by Autodesk,
oh,
so
sure.
there's a little bit of
There's a filter.
Autodesk promotion.
Yeah.
But if you get past that, it's just a really cool event. So if you can come one day, it would be really nice. They're
Yeah,
doing it in
hoping next
in
year. Because I know it's in
they're
Vegas as well next year, so I'd love
yeah,
to
it's
go
in
back.
Vegas. They're doing it in Vegas again this year. Yeah, some people were complaining about the venue. This time it was in New Orleans, which New Orleans is much cooler than Vegas, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's a real city, and
Yeah.
but the convention center was not the best, and the crime rate was pretty high in New Orleans when
Yeah,
we
I heard
were
it
there.
was safe. Yeah, on the parties.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, I've heard someone got stabbed. So
he stabbed. I thought it was just beaten up. Wow.
yeah, pretty rough, pretty rough.
Must have
But
been the open BIM people.
yeah, but yeah, if you go on Bourbon Street at night, it's a pretty wild place.
Stick to the main streets. What I'm always told. You can't go one street back after that. You're in a whole different world. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah,
so I'll probably go back to AU next year since I'm trying to limit myself to one conference. Two, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time on the calendar as well, which is in November, so almost 1 year from now.
Yeah. How about you? Do you have a movie that stood out to you for the year?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what was my favorite movie of the year. I wasn't too sure about it. Last year, I really liked Dune quite a lot.
Oh yeah. June was good. Yeah, I actually watched that this year for the first time. It was pretty impressive. Yeah, they did a good job. Yeah.
This year, the Batman was pretty good. So how do you feel when it compares to the Nolan movies? Like
Easily better. Yeah, like
yeah.
it got the grit of Gotham just so much more
Uh-huh.
right. Like Gotham felt too clean in the Nolan trilogy. It felt like you were
Uh-huh.
just walking around New York and broad daylight, whereas it sort of forgot the fact it's a comic. It's not meant to be just like, hey, I could go out and I'm in Gotham because I'm just walking around the city. So I appreciated what it tried to do, but I felt like it should have just held on to its roots a bit more tightly. And I think it suffered for it by the third one because they were almost getting comical in the third movie with like the nuclear bomb in the middle
Yeah,
of the
the,
city.
the
I'm
third
like,
one
I don't believe
was
this.
bad. Yeah, the one with the Joker was really good, but
Yeah,
third one
Dark
wasn't very
Knight
good.
is up there for me as one
Yeah.
of my favorite movies. Even though it's not as comical, like I mean, Heath Ledger just he knocked it out of the park. Like,
Yeah.
funny hand to him. Yeah, but I really liked Paul Dano actually as the Riddler. So I
Yeah.
could probably talk forever about this. I won't go too long. But Paul Dano actually really surprised me with his performance as well. So Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty big Nirvana fan, and I like the fact that they brought their song twice in the soundtrack.
Oh yeah, yeah, something in
And
the way. Yeah.
and apparently Robert Pattinson said he was inspired by Kurt Cobain, like as a figure and like for
I think,
how he played the character.
yeah, yeah, he had that sort of apathy, like in his
Hmm.
sort of the way he spoke. He was very distracted on things that people couldn't see, and yeah, I can see that. Interesting. Yeah, yeah, very cool.
And Alice, TV shows. Did you watch the Lord of the Ring
I
TV
did.
show? What did you think about it?
It was like I tried to enjoy it. I really did. There were some bits that I didn't mind, like maybe 1 out of 8 of the story arcs were
Hmm.
okay, but they just I couldn't figure out what they were going for. It just felt
Yeah.
too all over the place, and they tried so hard to hide who Sauron was, and I won't say who he was, but I feel like in the process they made it too obvious, and then it wasn't even
Mm.
like a big thing when they said, "Oh, it's him or her or whoever it is," and I was like, "No, I just couldn't buy it." But I don't know. It's hard. Like those movies, they're hard to follow. They were just done in such a faithful manner. Like not really The Hobbit, but I thought Lord of the Rings captured that sort of mid sort of dark vibe, that it wasn't just a happy place and the hobbits weren't just dancing around and laughing giddily like there was serious threats, whereas I
Hmm.
couldn't buy the half foots in this one, for example.
Yeah.
Listen to me go. But yeah, no, it wasn't really my thing. Like I'll probably watch season 2 begrudgingly, but if they get approved for a season
Yeah.
2,
Well, I
probably
almost
not.
abandoned the show after the first few episodes. I thought that
Yeah.
the last 3 episodes were pretty good. Like they made up
Oh,
for the
they brought it
rest.
together. Yeah,
Yeah,
it did
at the
better,
end,
but
but like at first, like man, it just seems to go on, and
yeah,
there's not a lot of tension at first.
yeah. Every time a half foot bit came up, I just like went on my phone.
Yeah,
It's like, here we go again. Let's talk about nuts and berries for 20 minutes.
yeah. I liked the House of the Dragon was pretty good.
Yes. Yeah,
Did
they
you like it
really
as
knocked that
well?
one out of the park. I
Yeah.
reckon better than Game of Thrones. Better than Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Hmm.
At
Yeah.
least better than the last season, but I mean, probably Lord of the Rings was too. But yeah, I loved House of the Dragon. They killed it. Yeah, I forget his name, the actor for Daemon. Oh wow, he really
Demon.
knocked
Yeah.
it out of the park. Yeah, yeah, he did a great
Yeah.
job.
Yeah. Yeah. That was pretty good. I like that one a lot. I think it
Yeah,
was better than the
he,
Lord of the Rings series.
you know you've done a good job as an actor when everyone else gets a new actor when they age, and for them they're just like, just give them
Yeah.
grey hair, we've got to keep him in the
Yeah.
role.
Exactly.
Exactly. But no, it was very good. Yeah, I did enjoy it. So hopefully there's some good follow ups next year on those ones, I guess. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So
Cool. Covered a lot of
okay,
ground.
I think we should
Oh wow, it's one
finish
o'clock.
this.
Yeah. Hour and a half again.
So let me share. Can we see? Okay. So RevitPure.com. I have 3 courses you can get: basics for beginners, design if you want to use Revit for presentation purpose, and manage for BIM manager if you are more intermediate to advanced users. I also sell a template called the Pro Template on my website, all at RevitPure.com. And courses.bimguru.education, or is there a more easy URL for you to get all
Oh
your
no, that's
content?
the right one. I didn't go too deep on the domain. So, yeah.
Okay, or search for BIMGuru and it should find you. You have one Dynamo course, is that right?
Yep, yep, and some free models, content and templates if people want. But there's some free models there at the least if you just want some good quality Revit models.
Yeah, the healthcare model. We didn't talk about that, but check this out. The healthcare model you released this year is super interesting. So the course for Dynamo, and you have the model. Is it over there? Yeah, the healthcare model, and it's free. So
Cool.
have a look at that. I think I'll paste the URL in the video description.
Thanks.
Families, bundles, templates as well at courses.bimguru.education, or just Google BIMGuru and you should find it. All right, that's it.
Cool.
So
It's very fun. Yeah.
thanks to all the viewers and listeners. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, or Happy whatever you're celebrating. And looking forward to next year. So the plans for me this next year, in the fall, I've ran a cohort of a family course I've been working on with only 25 students. I will probably repeat that in the spring with a brand new cohort. It was really fun to do, and I think it was pretty successful. One of the students was there in the chat, so thanks to former students. Else, yeah, I'm working really hard on a new website for BIM Pure, and Gavin is restarting his YouTube series. Amazing tutorials. Yeah, by the way, when I was doing my family course, I did watch a few of your videos. That was super helpful.
Glad to help. Yeah. They're in the public to be used, so I'm more than happy to be able to use them. So yeah, so I'll be back in February just to elaborate with some new topics. Check out my channel if you want a more detailed update. That's the Aussie BIM Guru. And I'll be trying to do weeklies as well, but more simple format, just focusing on programming typically. So yeah, hopefully see some of you there. I just
Yeah.
want to say thanks to you as well before we sign off as well. Thank you for having me on board. It's always fun to do the annual wrap up, and I'm always happy to do next year as well. I'm sure there'll be a
Yeah.
lot of changes.
Yeah, I mean, this should be an annual tradition. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. And I guess too,
Uh,
I'll be focusing obviously on my work with Architectus and BIM Consulting next year, but I will try to share what I can about that, and hopefully there'll be some articles we'll be putting out as well from there. So if you keep an eye on those organisations too, there'll be some activity too. But yeah, thanks again, and I hope you have a happy holidays and everyone else in the chat as well.
all right. Happy holidays, everybody, and see you next year. Bye.
See you everyone.